Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I wanted to do an episode talk about the quarterback madness and how to keep your head going while you go through it as a Steelers fan. We'll talk about that and answer a lot of your questions here on today's Locked On Steelers episode. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. More on them later. All right, Steelers fans, let's talk about what I'm calling quarterback madness. And while March Madness is going on, that's awesome. Quarterback madness drives you insane. It drives me insane. What I mean by quarterback madness is whenever the craziness starts to happen, when you just get further into quarterback talks, your team doesn't have a franchise quarterback, as the Steelers haven't had for a while now. And we know how things get and how rumors start, and then everyone starts spiraling and thinking, oh, this is unredeemable. This is terrible. I want to help you center yourself on how to deal with these things, because more rumors came out yesterday and people went crazy on Steelers Twitter about it. So let's center with what we do know about the right now. And I think that's one of the most important things is when you hear things that don't sound like they make sense, or they sound like they're wild and crazy and they don't add up, remember what you do know. Right now, what we do know is the Steelers have an offer out to Aaron Rodgers. For what I've heard and for what I've told you on the show from the people I trust, the offer was not that expensive. It's for a one-year deal. The Steelers aren't upping it or doing anything to give Aaron Rodgers anything more that he wants. It's an offer out, and it's simply up to Aaron Rodgers if he wants to accept it or not. And if they don't, they'll move on. And if you don't believe me, this got furthered by an actual report by Tom Pelissero, NFL Network, who went over this and was talking about this, on the airwaves. And he was saying, he said he gave a similar report where he said the same thing. He said, hey, the Steelers have a one-year offer to Aaron Rodgers. They aren't moving on it. This is up to him. This isn't some crazy goose chase that the Steelers are trying to so hard to bring in Aaron Rodgers. Not simping for Aaron Rodgers. They're not chasing for Aaron Rodgers. They just said, hey, Aaron, here's an offer. You don't want it? All right, we'll roll with Mason Rudolph and these other options, but this is just the offer that's out there, and they're not in a rush to for him to figure it out. They're going to make their decision when he makes his decision. When he makes his decision, and if he doesn't, they'll figure out what they want to do after that. That's it. But the one thing that I did think that Tom Pelissero added that was very interesting, that I did think added some color to this, he said that the visit that Aaron Rodgers paid to the Steelers last week when he visited their facility was Aaron Rodgers' decision to make. This was his request that he came up with. This was not the Steelers saying, hey, Aaron, come on in. Let me show you the facilities. Let me show you the coaches. The Steelers didn't bend over backwards. This was Aaron Rodgers saying, hey, can I come in and just talk to people for like 6 hours just to get a sense of what's going on here? So if anything, this just furthers the reports that we've been suggesting here all along since the start of this process with Aaron Rodgers, and we thought that there was a real possibility he could join the Steelers, that the Steelers aren't going all out for Aaron Rodgers right now. They simply said, hey, they have an idea. They're going to here's an offer, and that's it. But there's people that are trying to push the narrative that the Steelers are desperate to get Aaron Rodgers. Like I said last week, if they really were, when Aaron Rodgers did visit their facility, one, they would have requested it. They would have been the party that called in and said, hey, come on in. And two, when he got into the facility, they wouldn't have allowed him to leave. That's typically how negotiations work, is when you get there, they want to make sure that you don't leave without a deal. Otherwise, they know that things can get pretty crazy. But again, they're not being desperate for it. He called for the meeting, and I'd say the notion that the Steelers aren't desperate in this situation, they're not string themselves out just to get Aaron Rodgers. I think that becomes more and more clear when we look at the actual information here. Second, the Steelers aren't acting as if this year's quarterback is their primary move for the future. We continue to talk about, this is a stopgap quarterback year. This is simply to get you to 2026, and then you look at that draft class, you figure it out, and you prepare to make your big move, load up your assets so you can go get your quarterback for the future then, and also do what you can this year to prepare your organization, your team, and your roster so that it's ready to receive what you hope will be a franchise level quarterback as a rookie, and you can hit with irons. You can hit with irons hot and kind of do what the Commanders did this past year in getting Jaden Daniels in, having a good core around him, and then rising a lot faster and seeing your team become more competitive really quickly. So that's the ultimate goal this year, not finding a quarterback for the future. They don't think that Aaron Rodgers is going to lead them to the promised land. They just know their biggest chance comes in next year's draft, and they're preparing for that. If they can add Rodgers to it, fine. If not, they'll work with Rudolph and another cheap vet or maybe a rookie. Maybe they'll do something like that. But that's all this is right now. Don't try to make it to be something else. Don't let someone else try to make it to be something else to you, which is what I think is happening to a lot of Steelers fans who freak out in my comment section, who freak out on social media, and often it's like, Chris, what's going on here? I get emails in my Post-Gazette email account. They're like, I don't understand what's going on here. Why are they doing all this stuff? It's like, listen, they're not. Look at every bit of reporting. They're chilling. They're not budging. They're not jumping up. If Aaron Rodgers picks somewhere else or just retires or just says, I'm not playing, they'll be like, fine, we're rolling with this guy. It's the same thing that Cam Heyward said on his podcast, a couple of weeks ago or last week, wherever it was, he was on his podcast saying those things. That's their mindset. You're going to see reports pop up over the night. And so I say it to help you prepare, because we are still in just this stage of things. Now, there's the rumors out there that Aaron Rodgers will announce his decision to come to Pittsburgh at Pat McAfee's live show in Pittsburgh at PPG Pants Arena on April 9th. I can't tell you if that's true or not. I don't. That would fit the bill, but who cares? Like, if that happens when it happens, fine. But what's going to happen that I will try to help you with now is that until that decision is made, and even after the decision is made, sometimes this will still pop up. There's going to be wild conspiracy theories or wild theories thrown out there that are going to get you to throw your hands up in the air and think, what the heck is going on? This doesn't make any sense. And they'll try to make you feel like some of this stuff is real when it's all just conjecture and just out there nonsense. And I think that that's something that happens a lot when we get to these things. And that's why I call it quarterback madness. And what I tell you is, don't buy into it. The Steelers, all the indications of how the Steelers have handled this offseason is that they are not desperate to find their quarterback for the future right now. If they were, they would have been much more aggressive in Justin Fields. They would have been much more aggressive. They would have gotten Geno Smith. They would have done something along those lines. But clearly, they have not. They have said, "Hey, we're not making those moves. We're doing this." And there's going to be people out there that's going to try to make you think otherwise. Like, for example, latest one that happened yesterday. Colin Cowherd went on his show and said that he has a source that says the Steelers are going to make Jalen Milroe their first round pick in the NFL draft this year and make him their franchise quarterback. And he's going to be the guy that's going to be the guy moving forward. Now, there's also been several other draft vectors who said the Steelers are going to draft Jackson Dart in the first round. But none of those make sense with the moves the Steelers have made. And who knows, maybe I'm out of touch. Maybe I'm wrong. Even though I predicted Broderick Jones last year. I predicted offensive tackle last year, Broderick Jones the year before that. I got Najee Harris right. The one I didn't get was Kenny Pickett, because I didn't think Kenny Pickett would be available at that point in time. I thought they were going to go with a corner or someone like that in that year. But I got Devin Bush right when I was predicting that. I even predicted in the Broderick Jones year where they would trade up to get Broderick Jones to make sure that they got him, in the above the Jets. And so, and I'm not saying that I'm Nostradamus. All I'm saying is that I read the tea leaves, and the way I read the tea leaves usually gets me close to what the Steelers are trying to do. And the first round quarterback moves is not in the tea leaves that I'm looking at here, unless somehow Cam Ward falls into range. And then I'm like, okay, that would change everything. But Cam Ward's not falling into range. He's going first overall, second overall in that range. The Steelers aren't trading up to get him in this draft class of a situation. Again, all the moves suggest they're doing something like that next year. But again, none of these things make sense. Why would the Steelers do this to reach in a bad quarterback draft class year that they've abandoned talking to quarterbacks outside of the guys who are middle tier quarterbacks that they can get in the middle rounds? Also, when the Steelers, one of the things that people are hanging on, the Steelers met with Jalen Milroe. When they met with Jalen Milroe the night before the Alabama Pro Day, it was with a big dinner that traditionally do with all the Alabama recruits. It wasn't a huge special thing. It was just like hey, we're checking in on you. I don't think that they're sold on Milroe or any of these middle tier quarterbacks that should be third or fourth round picks actually being first round picks. Now, again, third round, if Jalen Milroe's around, that becomes a different question. At 83, I think there's some interesting value there because you could get a guy who's athletic, has the upside, and you're thinking, hey, if you could develop him, maybe he becomes a guy for you in the future. It sits along that. Again, I think this is more like Malik Willis back in 2022 before the Steelers drafted Kenny Pickett. The thought was the Steelers were interested in Malik Willis. But whereas some people thought that meant they were interested in him in the first round, I think that they were planning on drafting him in the middle rounds while they got their other pieces in the earlier rounds. And then we're going to make him a developmental quarterback. That's why they had gotten Mitch Trubisky. And it would have been a whole different dynamic for how the Steelers wanted to operate at quarterback, at the times. But again, Kenny Pickett fell. They made the move to get him, and that didn't work out. And now we're back to square one, covering the Steelers and talking about that. But again, I think that's the plan here. I think Milroe, Will Howard, Tyler Shuck, all those types of quarterbacks, that's who the Steelers are looking hard at right now. And those are not first-round pick guys. Those are third at best, more likely fourth-round pick is where I think that there's a really big thing there. And this year, they want to use that first-round pick, and maybe if they trade back and pick up an extra third-round pick, I think they want to use those earlier day one and day two picks to find foundational pieces like D-line, corner, receiver, young pieces that contribute to the core that's eventually going to be the group that's going to welcome the quarterback of the future that they go get next year. That's what I think is the plan. But if you keep jumping at every, and if you, the fan, keep jumping at every thing that someone throws at you about a wild quarterback conspiracy, or just a wild story about, the Steelers might be into this really specific plan that gets them this quarterback, and they're going to make him the quarterback of the future, and they feel like this is the guy. You're going to waste your energy. You're going to waste your time. You're going to drive up your anxiety, and you're going to miss out on the aspects of the Steelers that are actually important to look at right now, like what's the defensive line class? What are the strengths that you want to get? Do you want more of a guy that's already developed in his pass rush? Do you want a guy that's more developed in his run stopping? Do you want a guy that can do both on the D line? What kind of corners do you want? The things that they're doing right now that are actually going to impact things, and not these wild quarterback conspiracy theories that keep getting floated out there time again. So now that we've gotten that out the way, I want to get to your calls. We have a lot of calls on the Locked On Steelers hotline. We will get to all those calls next here on the Locked On Steelers. Not all of them. We're going to get to at least 4 of them in this show, but several of them we wanted to address. We'll do that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, remind you this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. March Madness is here, and FanDuel's giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And remember, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. That's FanDuel.com to sign up today. Remember, if you're a new customer, you can get $200 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our episode here. We're going to take your calls now. As always, you can always call in to our show at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. Also, I really highlight to keep your question under a minute because some of y'all be going like 2 whole minutes with y'all questions, and I cannot put that on the air. We got too many things to get to. So if I don't share your question, sometimes it might be that your question was way too long. So I apologize for those who do that, but I appreciate the passion when y'all call in because a lot of y'all are really excited and want to get your thoughts out there or want to get my thoughts on something. So let's start doing that. And we're going to start doing this with a question that does delve into the quarterback situation and a what-if scenario that I see more and more people ask. So I wanted to get this out the way. Julio from Cleveland, Ohio, had this to ask about Shedeur Sanders.
Good morning, Chris. My name is Julio. I'm calling from Cleveland, Ohio. I just have a question. I've been seeing a lot of mock drafts and seeing where Shedeur Sanders could fall. If somehow he does reach us in the draft in the first round, do you think we would draft him? Would we take the chance on him? Think he's a good quarterback? You think he's fit with Mike Tomlin? Thank you for your time. Big fan of the show. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you, Julio, for your question. As always, you can call like Julio did at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, keep your question under a minute. And again, a lot of y'all calling. Thank you so much, because you always give me a lot to sift through when I delve into the call-in sections to get questions. So let me put it this way. With Shedeur Sanders, one, I don't think he's going to be there. I think that someone's going to take a shot at him in the earlier part of the draft this year. I think that someone's going to be desperate for a quarterback, and they'll make that move, and then that'll solve that problem for you. But let's say that he does get there. I talked about this, I believe, with Nick Farabaugh last week, and talking about some of the quarterbacks in this draft class, about Shedeur Sanders and where he fits. Listen, I think Shedeur Sanders has displayed some really cool moments in his college football career, where he's made some really big time throws, stepped up, and found a way to make something happen in a big moment. But the problem is, I look at his skill set and I wonder if what you're going to be getting is another similar version of Kenny Pickett. And when I say Kenny Pickett, I don't mean just that he's going to play just like him, but there's several things about him that I think that call into question. For example, he doesn't have the normal size that you want at quarterback. He's 6'2", not 6'4", 6'5". And that's not a killer, because there's guys that are 6'2" and they're fine. But he doesn't have the NFL arm he doesn't have the cannon that's going to outthrow, corners that are chasing down your wide receivers. He doesn't fit them into he can't hit that tight rope, 20 yards into the really tight window. Now, he is very good at his throwing motion. He's very consistent in that, and that helps with his precision. And when he has a clean pocket, he can decipher what you're doing, and he can deliver a good football. And that's where I think Shedeur Sanders could be of use. But I think that what the Steelers are looking at here, you see, like Shedeur Sanders, when he gets under pressure, he does a lot of things that Kenny Pickett did. Like, he will try to spin out of it, lose focus for a little bit, and then that's when often he can get himself into trouble. And there were times in college where that worked for him, just like it worked for Kenny Pickett, because you could buy time, you get away with things, less disciplined defenses in college. That doesn't happen as much in the NFL. That's why Kenny Pickett, a lot of things he did at Pitt, he couldn't do for the Steelers, so he had to adjust his game. And that's where I think Shedeur Sanders is going to have to do similar things there. I could be wrong, because Shedeur Sanders might have all the X factors that he needs. His dad certainly did it during his career, but his dad was also one of the best athletes at cornerback when he came into the NFL, and remained that for a long time. Shedeur Sanders also does not have elite athleticism. He's not extremely fast. He's decent. He can get around a little bit, and it's because of those tools that I don't think the Steelers draft him at 21st overall. Maybe if he's there, if he's there in the third round, I think they might be like, oh, okay, that's a little bit different. But I don't think he's fallen 21, let alone the second or third round, for the Steelers to be able to get him there. So thank you for the question, though, Julio, because Shedeur Sanders, I do think, is a unique difference between. I think he's better than Jackson Dart. I think he's better than a lot of those other guys that are in the lower rounds, but I don't think that he's good enough for the Steelers to take the shot at and say, hey, we're going to give him a shot to be our franchise guy. If he does, I think you add a guy like him for depth more than anything. So with that being said, let's move on to our next question. This question comes from Doug out in Plum, Pennsylvania, and it revolves around Cam Heyward and his future with the team, but in a different way. I thought this was interesting. Doug, take it away.
Hi, Chris. This is Doug from Plum. Over the years, I've heard and seen interviews with Cam Heyward, and just recently the interviews he's been given about the state of the Steelers and what's going on. I just hope that if and when he decides to retire, the Steelers are smart enough to offer that man a job somewhere in the Steeler organization, be it a scout, coach, front office, something. I just think he's too smart of a person for this organization to let walk out of here. Something similar to what the Post-Gazette did with you. So I'll hang up and maybe I'll hear from you.
Doug, thank you for your question. As always, 412-223-6644 to get your question on the air, just like Doug did and everyone else does to get on this show. Leave your name, where you're from, keep your question under a minute. Doug, I feel honored that you're talking about the Post-Gazette making that move with me. It certainly was a big move, and I am very appreciative of my superiors at the Post-Gazette that give me the opportunity. And in fact, check out the North Shore Drive podcast. We talk about a few things with Brian Batko this Friday. And also we have our big board, and you can assemble do a lot of draft research on the stuff that we did there at post-gazette.com. So check that out. But to answer Doug's question about Cam Heyward, I also think that Cam Heyward is very smart. He knows what he's doing. He obviously knows how to connect to people. That's one thing he does well. But I don't think Cam has any interest in being a coach. I think Cam wants to be a media personality, hence the reason he has his podcast. I think Cam Heyward is setting himself up so that when it comes time for him to move on, he's going to be one of those guys you see on like Amazon on Thursday Night Football or whatever night that they're hosting football games, because the amount of football games are getting ridiculous. I think he's going to be one of those guys, or an ESPN guy or a Fox guy or a CBS guy. I think he's positioning himself for a media career, because I think that Cam Heyward, I think he loves football. And I think that, look, the Steelers, if he wanted to, the Steelers would be like, yeah, come on in, man. You're Mr. Steeler. But we hear this all the time with famous Steelers, right? And it just sometimes it don't work out as easy as people make it out to be. Like, for example, Hines Ward, true leader, another Mr. Steeler. Like, he represented the organization. He was what it meant to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. And he wanted to be a coach, and he is a coach, but it didn't work with the Steelers. And they were like, we're going to move on here. People thought that was crazy. And Hines Ward has not turned into this unstoppable, like Brian Hartline, like receivers coach that revolutionizes the coaching world. And I think that's part of the acknowledgement. And I think that there's sometimes that people think that just, they played well, they're going to coach great. It doesn't always work that way. And there's a lot of things about coaching that people don't understand, about the intricacies, about the little day-to-day things that are required of them to be that. And some guys, they're built to be players. They're not built to be coaches. Some guys they operate in very different ways. And I think that that's where Cam Heyward, I don't know what Cam Heyward would be like as a coach. I know he's like as a leader. I think that he could lead. But you also have to ask, Cam Heyward has to ask himself, does he want to do that? Because here's the thing, when you become a coach in the NFL, or a coach anywhere, you're moving around a lot. And not just for traveling for games or anything, but look at Joey Porter Sr. when he became a coach for the Steelers. That was his stint. That was that. But a lot of coaches, even if you get hired in a place that loves you, you might have to be prepared for someday to have to go work somewhere and coach somewhere else. I think if Cam Heyward wanted to do football in the next level, the Steelers will welcome him with open arms, say, hey, here's a scouting position, or here's a coaching position. They would work with him to make it happen, because he is Mr. Steeler. But I think Cam Heyward has I think he's paid his dues. I think that he knows what value he brings. And I think this is something that he's been talking about for years. Just interviewing him, he's wanted to be one of those media personalities. And look at him even this week. Like this, just yesterday, in fact, Skip Bayless tried to call out Cam Heyward and said, "Oh yeah, now he loves Aaron Rodgers." And even though as I said, he didn't hate Aaron Rodgers, he simply said he would go on a darkest retreat to recruit him, and he didn't say he didn't want Aaron Rodgers. And on his recent podcast, he was just he said the same sort of thing, like, hey, if he comes, great. If he doesn't, great too, whatever. But Skip Bayless tried to make it seem like, oh, Cam Heyward just wants to, he's changing his tune now, haha. And Cam Heyward just clapped back at him and said, first of all, you didn't spell my name right, because he spelled it with, he spelled it H-A-Y-Y. No, H-A-Y-W-A-R-D. It's H-E-Y. And then he said, also, just at me when you're talking about me. And I was just like, dang, like Cam Heyward just bagging people. That's the Cam Heyward that I think that he wants to be. I think he wants to be a media personality, and I think he'd be a great one. Cam's great to talk to. He's a lot of fun. He's very nice. He's very personable. He understands how to connect with people. That's something that I think that he'll do there. But I do think, Doug, if he wanted to take his football career, his post playing career into coaching or other things like that inside the facility, I think the Steelers would welcome him with open arms to do so. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, more questions for you, including about the uses of Broderick Jones and why it hasn't or has made sense. That and more questions here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, stick with us. We'll be right back. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We take our next question on the Locked On Steelers call-in line from Jacob in Charleston, South Carolina. Jacob, take it away.
Hey, Chris, this is Jacob from Charleston, South Carolina. Big fan of your show. Listen to it regularly. I got two questions for you. Number one, I haven't really heard a whole lot of people dive deep into why wasn't Mike Williams utilized more when we traded for him. We were talking all season about needing a good wide receiver number 2, and I felt like that's what we had, especially after that first game with him. And then he did basically nothing. Second question, I still do not understand how we can be okay with our coaching staff having our number 1 pick from, 2-3 years ago in Broderick Jones playing out of position just to help a third rounder who was going to be gone soon anyway. Those are my questions. Appreciate your time. Love your show. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Jacob, for your question. As always, call like Jacob did at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, keep your question under a minute. We'll try to get your question on the show. So let's address Mike Williams first. We'll get to Broderick Jones because that's the meatier part of the question that I think is there. Honestly, I think part of it was the feuding that was going on between Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith that didn't allow Mike Williams to flourish. Because back when Russell Wilson had really come onto the scene, he had a lot more command of the offense. You saw that touchdown pass to the Commanders that changed everything. And I don't think there was a need to try to force the ball to Mike Williams, but I think he would have eventually gone back to him. But Arthur Smith wanted to limit Russell Wilson's hot read audible calls there. Russell Wilson wanted to have more freedom, and I think that some of that led to the discord on offense, which is why I think that's one of the underlying problems that happened there was, the offensive line got worse, the connection wasn't great between the OC and the quarterback, and I think that led to some issues there. That's not to excuse all of it, but I do think it was a mistake. They wanted to get a number 2 wide receiver. They got another guy who can line up opposite of George Pickens, play outside and be a threat. And then they barely went to him. And I also think that was a mistake. Now, granted, they were also not supposed to be that much of a passing team last year. They're supposed to be more of a running team. They just didn't run the ball well. And I think that's, in the last 5 games. But I think that played a bigger factor into things for Mike Williams. I don't think that the plan was for him to turn into a star receiver for them. But I do agree with you in the sense that they needed to find a way to use him better. That was a mistake, and now he's gone. I do think that, whatever their quarterback situation is, they need to make sure that these quarterbacks understand and get the ball to both Metcalf and Pickens, and still find a way to work in Freiermuth, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, whoever. Like, get the ball out, let your guys be playmakers. I think the Steelers have a good list of playmakers at the wide receiver position right now that can make it easier on quarterbacks to do that and to not make the same mistake with Mike Williams. But let's get to the Broderick Jones side of this thing. Now, Broderick Jones, what's crazy is I'm with you. Like, I don't understand why he's been, if he's a left tackle, why he hasn't been at left tackle. I mean, I get the explanation. The idea is Dan Moore, by the way, a 4th round pick, not even a 3rd round pick. Oof. Dan Moore is, supposedly was incapable of playing right tackle. And so they left him at left tackle, which Dan Moore had gotten better at in his career. And they wanted to put Broderick at right to give him playing experience, and they figured him at right would be better at Dan at right, and then that the 2 of them being there in the starting offensive line, that was acceptable. That was fine for what you wanted. But I hear you in your complaint, because to me, Jacob, I honestly agree. I thought that they should have told Dan Moore, baby, get over it. Either you adjust to go play right tackle, or we find someone else. And now Dan Moore is out in free agency making a ton of money, and looks like he's going to get them a 3rd round comp pick. How about that? But I do think it's a mistake. Now, I also think it's important that they might be trying to challenge Broderick Jones to learn faster and learn differently by having him play on that side. And when he flips to the left, it's going to be a lot easier for him. There's a chance that that's part of their development process for him. Only time will tell if that's the case. But right now, I do think that there's a question there, because how they've handled this has been a problem. And when you look at Kevin Dotson complaining about what side he wants to be on, and then that leads to he doesn't work out, the Steelers trade him away, and he becomes a good lineman for the Rams. You look at those 2 situations. I think the Steelers need to figure out offensive line. And I think this is actually Mike Tomlin's biggest task for this season. This offensive line has to coalesce. It has to take a step forward. If it does not, it will put the Steelers in a real serious bind for years to come. This needs to be an asset to the team with the 2 first-round picks that they've invested, a second-round pick at center, and then the additions that they're going to make along at guard. And I just think that has to be the case. Now, to give Mike Tomlin credit, he's also built one of the better offensive line units in recent Steelers history. That Pouncey, DeCastro, Gilbert, Foster, Villanueva / Beecham crew. That crew stuck together for such a long time with the weapons that they had on the offensive line, and they were a bad set of dudes when push came to shove, and that was really important. And I think that Mike Tomlin should be given the opportunity to make that kind of thing happen again within his roster. But these picks that they've made, they need to start hitting, and if they don't, it's going to lead to some major problems, major questions, and then I think you're going to see even bigger problems coming from the Steelers moving forward. All right, we got one more question here. This question I thought was very interesting. Rick from Canton, Ohio, asked this question, and this was not something I ever expected to hear, but I think it helps provide some perspective into moves the Steelers have and have not made over the past few years. But here's Rick Simmons.
My name is Rick Simmons from Canton, Ohio. Just ask this question, see what you think about it. In Roethlisberger replacement, was it supposed to be Dwayne Haskins? Unfortunately, he fell to a tragic death in 22. Then they drafted Kenny Pickett. So I'm wondering, was Dwayne Haskins and Mason Rudolph supposed to battle for that number one quarterback spot? Thank you for listening to me. I enjoy watching your show. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rick. As always, call 412-223-6644 to get your question on the air, just like Rick and several other people did tonight or today. But Rick, let's get to this. I do not think that Dwayne Haskins was the answer for the Steelers when it came to being the franchise quarterback after him. I do think that he was a potential answer, and at least another guy that could have been the stopgap guy, because you are right. Like, if you look at the position that he was in at that point in time, this is a guy who was a 15th overall pick in the 2019 NFL draft. He was the 15th overall pick for the Commanders. Didn't work out. The Steelers picked him up, got him for a song, and then he was on the roster in 2021 in Ben Roethlisberger's last season. Ben Roethlisberger hyped him up, talked about how he could throw a ball through a car wash and not get the ball wet. Like, he had that cannon arm, and he was developing, and he was going to be the guy that could compete alongside Mason Rudolph in 2021 moving forward. But then he passes away with the tragic accident in 2022 when he passed away, April 9th of 2022. So shortly before the draft that year, like weeks before the draft. And that was very sad. Now, do the Steelers still draft Kenny Pickett if he's still around? Maybe. I don't know. I don't think that might have deterred them from that. But I do think that he would have given them another option of a guy to keep around that they could have continued to develop, continue to build, and then maybe he would have turned into something. And I'm not saying that's if Dwayne Haskins just didn't die, then the Steelers quarterback situation would be fine right now. No, it'd probably be in a very similar spot. But he would have been another option there. It would have been someone else to compete with Mason Rudolph. It would have been another guy to try to sign long-term and say, hey, you know what? We're just going to rock out with this guy for a bit there. So to answer your question, I don't think it would have been the huge change. I don't think it would have been the future. I do think it would have given them another bridge option. And then while they were figuring out where they wanted to take their big stand in the draft to get their quarterback of the future, he could have been the guy holding it down rather than, Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett and the guys that have, Mitch Trubisky and the guys that have kind of filled those roles in recent years. So certainly an unfortunate thing that happened there and a sad thing that happened there. We did an episode about that right when the day that it was made public that went down. And that was a very sad time. I got the honor of meeting Dwayne Haskins a few times before he passed away. But in all seriousness, I don't think that would have changed a whole lot. I just don't. I think he still had a lot to put together as a quarterback, but certainly it would have given the Steelers another option, which could have changed things, for the time being as far as how they handled quarterbacks. So with that being said, those are all our mailbag questions here. Thank you for everyone who calls into the show at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, your question, where you're from, and keep your question under a minute. We thank everyone that participates in those. It's awesome to come through you guys. We still have a lot of calls I haven't been able to get to because we just got so much to do here. We'll try to get to more of them next week here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But thank you again for tuning into the show. I'm your host, Chris Carter. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the social media, same handle everywhere at Carter Critiques. You can rerun work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. You can find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers. Back here Monday with more on your Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers Steelers podcast.